Und Damian Nenow zu Gast bei mir, deren Animationsfilm Another Day of Life bereits auf dem Festival in Cannes gefeiert wurde und heute Abend hier in Deutschland Premiere hat. Raúl de la Fuente ist ein preisgekrönter Dokumentarfilmer aus Spanien, der in unzähligen Krisenregionen auf der ganzen Welt unterwegs war und 2015 mit seiner Kurzdoku Minerita für den Oscar nominiert war. Damian Nenow ist ebenfalls ein preisgekrönter Filmemacher aus Polen und vor allem bekannt für seine animierten Kurzfilme und 3D-Animationen. Das nur für Sie vorweg. Wir werden uns jetzt gleich auf Englisch unterhalten. Raúl und Damian, great to have you here. Welcome.
Welcome. How are you?
I don't want to reveal too much of your movie before everybody's able to see it, actually, but I think it's okay to say that it's about the Polish journalist and his journey through Angola. And his name is Richard Kapuczynski, and he is well known as a reporter. And your movie especially is about one part of his life where he went in 1975 to Angola to report on the civil war. He stayed there for 3 months, and as he came back, he wrote a book, and the book is called Another Day of Life, and you adapted it kind of for your movie. And Raúl, in one of your first interviews you gave concerning your movie, I read that you said, as you read this book of Kapuczynski, you had no other opportunity to, you saw it already in your head as an animated film, and you had no other opportunity than to do it. Please explain that to us.
Yeah, it was such a fall in love situation, no? When you find a material that absolutely captures you, and you have no other option that go with it. It's very curious because I'm not an animation person, I'm not an animation director, but when I read the book with my producer, Amaya Ramirez, from the Basque Country too, we imagined that on animation. It was like a sign. But not only animation, but also with live action. For us, it was very important to tell the story that Kapuczynski told on the book, on 75, to tell it in animation, but a very special animation. Because I was talking with Amaya saying, we want to make this film, but we want to make something important, something that remains. And we see very clear that Damian Nenow's style of working animation, he had a previous film called Paths of Hate, and we watched it because a Polish friend told to me, have to see this film of this Polish animator. So we saw the film and said, okay, this is the look we were imagining. So we wanted to do something big, something important that will remain forever. And for us, the idea of mixing with animation was very, very important because all these stories we are telling in the film are true. They really happen, and they are the real characters in front of our camera to remember us that all this dream is a real dream. So we wanted to confront the challenge of make a fusion of animation and live action. So yeah, that's the origin.
Just for the audience to understand, it's called animation movie, but it's part animation, part documentary. So you have these animated scenes. I think that's where Damian got on board as well, but maybe you can explain that later to us, how exactly you work together. And then you have documentary scenes of people you actually met and who have been on the road with Kapuczynski.
Yeah, mainly 75% of the footage is animation and 25% is live action. Yeah. So it's an animation film that incorporates real footage of the survivors of the war. But it's an animation film incorporating a small part of live action.
Damian, you called the book a gold mine. How much was there actually left for you to do then to tell a story?
I mean, Richard Kapuczynski left us really a huge window, actually, of mix real facts, you know, and undeniable truth with this allegorical. Felt quite, which was undeniable truth. We had their own real memories, even if they were, you know, 100% fact, and we have it. So we by real stories, kind of analyzing it and synthesizing it again, and then creating and designing this animated.
That was one part why you choose to animate it.
No point. We really wanted to make a new film, an animated film incorporating live. Final cut of the film, we can see but we realized that we wanted also to no, it's not like that.
Or people fighting for their country, or people who want to be seen as humans as well. How much is this, story that you actually tell about a war in Africa and Angola, who, a civil war several years back, still a universal story, still something time?
Absolutely universal story, because now we are watching such a repetition of this Cold War that we are living now. For controlling Syria and their gas. In the 75 was a fight for controlling Angola with its diamonds and petrol, and now it's repeating. And also it's now much more interesting because we have a third actor there, a third agent, that is China, that is also fighting for being one of these superpowers, right? And in our trips in Africa, we realized that the presence of China is bigger and bigger, and they are going there to control the whole continent. And for me and for us, I suppose, we wanted to tell in political terms the one period of the history of humanity that will never happen again. That means how a whole continent is getting his freedom. It is something that will never happen again in the history of humanity, because all our continents got their freedoms. So Kapuczynski wanted to be the chronist of this period, and we wanted to also take part on that. And also we made that film to give answers to Kapuczynski. Kapuczynski wrote the book in 75, but several years later, I came back. Important. I met there. What has become of them? What about the young and stronger Farrusko? What about Arthur? What about the other? So he was a little bit, let's say, linked to that reality. And our mission was to answer to the master Kapuczynski, well, Ricardo, what happened is that and that and that. Farrusko is still alive. We don't know how. Arthur is still alive, and he continues being a journalist. Luis Alberto is still alive, and he has the image of Carlota before. Well, I don't want to spoil the thing. So, our mission with documentary was to answer Kapuczynski, and also to offer him a vision of the real Angola nowadays. But at the very beginning, we wanted to offer a little bit more of the current Angola, but at the end, we realized that there was not time enough to emotionally go deep into that, let's say, panorama. So we focus on the people, as Kapuczynski did. We focus on our main characters and on Kapuczynski.
But Kapuczynski, to me, he came along as a really, hard-on guy, like a hard-boiled person, like more the stereotypical guy. He's always smoking. He's, no matter how dangerous things are, he's going in there. He's more like a stereotype. He was a cool reporter, I think, but I couldn't really feel him. So was that part of your concept to make a hero out of him as well?
There is not going to be many opportunities of making films about Kapuczynski, so we tried also to create part of his legend, no, from the cinematographic part. So there is also a big exercise of course, simplification, because it's difficult to not simplify a person in a film, a person like him who traveled during 20 years by Africa. He wrote so many books. So yes, there is a kind of simplification, but it's important to say that his widow and his daughter in Cannes, when they saw the film, they said, we can feel and see our husband and father on your film, guys. Oh. So they were, of course, crying, and they said that movements, just father and husband, right? So I don't know, maybe, yeah, now in the film he has more hair than in real life. So of course Carlota is much more beautiful in animation than in real life, and she was beautiful and impressive. Yeah, it's a film. It's a film, and we spent 10 years making a film. He's going to appear with more hair, so
it's quite nice of you,
vision, right?
Yeah, it's of course it's our vision about him, and when you invest so much time, money, and suffering, why not to stay on that? You want to make something memorable, and she's going to be with more hair. It may be like a, yeah, we want to reach a wide audience. We would like to, we also decided to create an action film. Even we are dealing with very, very important themes and topics and poetry. To inform the world about what is happening there. This is so simple like that. And all the shape, the video games look, but there is a lot of poetry, politics, and his human and surreal approach to reality. So it's such a combination. Also, even the script is like simple. It's not very complicated. It's simple script to have the opportunities of include all these elements.
And as well, you know, his story as a reporter as well, especially today, you know, we have so many news about fake news, so many people right now who have no trust in the press. And you show us a reporter who doesn't care about his life, he really cares about what he's reporting on. But still, as Kapuscinski, as he came back and he decided to write that book, and that's part of the thoughts in your movie as well, is that he changed. This journey changed him, and even though he was well renowned afterwards as a reporter as well as a writer for literature, some people criticized him for that, and they said, well, as a reporter you only should write about facts and put no literature in it, no, you know, well-written poetic things. And now you two pair up and you fictional as well, and have these documentary parts. So how do you make sure that you are trustworthy with your real story?
And that's the very essence of Kapuscinski, what you have just mentioned, that he changed. And that's the essence of the film as well. I mean, that's the beauty of this book. I mean, except the book being a gold mine, as we already agreed to, that this is a gold mine for an action film. It's really, actually, we were probably reducing the action comparing to the book. But it is a bit of a testimony of a change, because there was a reporter, actually a star of journalism. That's also a bit of explanation why this vision of Kapuscinski, our vision, is done the way we did it. It's because of how we got inspired by him. He was already on 8 or 9 wars back then. He was a journalist. He even took a break. He was teaching on a university, but you know, he had lots of demons, and one of them was to understand the war. So in a way, that's a huge simplification, but still is. So there was no force that would stop him to go there, to this very heart of chaos, you know, Angola 75. Chasing demons is not necessarily the most professional goal you can have, or fascinations that he had, the romantic side of freedom fighters, this Che Guevara from a poster and so on. And this is the vision of and this is what inspired us to create the vision of this man at the beginning of his transformation. Because, as I said, the essence is the transformation. There was a reporter, star of journalism, going there, and a writer coming back. And soon after, he wrote his all most famous books and became one of the greatest writers in the century. So what changed in him? And probably a huge simplification once again. He reached these limits you were talking, the professional limits probably. He was not actually interested in reporting. that much. He wanted to tell the probably does not exist. But his way to do it was the very essence, his perspective, which was always from within the man to outside. He was never looking at people from a perspective from west to east or from north to west to south or something. He was always spending time, living with these people, engaging like 100%, because that was the only way for him. He had to immerse. Doesn't care if he was involving or not. He had to immerse, to understand, to be able to trust, to become a friend. And then, and only then, he could, in a way, write this or tell this ultimate real truth, which is not facts, actually. It's facts plus emotion. Change in the film, he revises. He reviews himself, by himself. So there was no point for us to judge him or comment. He gets there as a journalist star, as you said, a strong man with cigarettes and a blink in his eye, but he leaves the country as a different man, as a different person.
You traveled to Angola twice to see that. Did it change you as well?
Sorry?
Did it change you as well, or the
Me?
movie? Yeah.
Because I have more or less the same age than Kapuscinski when he went there. And I read writing for him that he was in jail, in the 40s, when you are with a lot of trouble about your life, what are you doing with your life, you're getting older. And he wanted to change. He wanted to make something memorable. And I think the book is alleged against death. And he wants, really, what he wants to do with this book is to live forever. I think he's trying to make something important, to be not to be forgotten, like an artist. And this is maybe what inspires him to focus on people, and he tries to give. For example, Carlota, no, and he wants to make a film not to be forgotten, to not forget all the civilians, innocent people who die in war. Is such a homage to the desire or remain, or not to be forgotten, to be alive forever, right? For me, it's this kind of obsession he had with remain, with being something memorable.
Maybe you can tell us something about your journey as filmmakers as well, because I think you spent 9 years on this project.
Yeah, that's the point. I think for us, it is something that marks our lives, of course. 10 years on a film, of course, it's affect to your whole life, because me, for example, I started with 33 and finished with 43, so it's a very important time in your life. And now, yes, I feel affected by my trips to Angola, our trips to Angola, by making this film. I feel affected, of course, very much. Everything I do affects to me. I remember the very one I did, Nomad TX, was a very shiny film, a very music trip, road movie. After that came another, was Minerita, Into the Mines, affected me a lot, of course, was a documentary, I was there in the mines. And Another Day of Life, of course, it marks my life forever. And also Angola, traveling to Angola and discovering these real characters that are much bigger in person than on the book. When I read the book, the words of Kapuscinski about them, I said, wow, interesting characters, so let's go. But when you arrive there and you face these guys, it changes you, of course. And
Maybe you can tell us about that. So was there a special moment maybe, or something that surprised you while you met one of the characters?
The first thing that surprised me a lot was Farrusco. He's a commander, he's Portuguese, he's a guy who went there like a special troop, but he exchanged side and he joined to the guerrilla, to the revolution, and he abandoned, let's say, his country to join the rebels, to help, to support real people. He believed that what he was doing like a paratrooper was bad. He didn't want to repress people with 24, and he exchanged side and joins to the guerrilla and instruct them, and he becomes the most southern commander, the most exposed, the one who is going to receive the invasion of South Africa. This is something incredible. And when I arrived there, he started talking to me in Spanish, and I said, well, but this guy is Portuguese, he joined to the guerrilla de Angola, and why he's talking to me in Spanish? Because he spent his whole life on the trenches with the Cuban guys. So all the history started to create the puzzle. And I remember him like my first trip, a very smart guy, very interested in current news. He was in his house all the time with the news and saying, maybe look, Raulito, look, that, blah, blah, blah. Approval of the Ministry of Defense of the country, and helicopters, planes, soldiers, and trucks were put for our disposition. Though we were using this all this machinery, and he was so
you used that. You used it.
Yeah, yeah. They're like in a dream. But it's not important. The important thing is, he's very big, and he's absolutely now confused about his life, because he gave his life for a cause, and he's not sure that it was worth it. He tries to demonstrate that it was, that what he did was good, but at the same time he said, I think he has this big conflict inside. And also Arthur, that is another main character that gave his life for that revolution, and he becomes telling that he considers him the big loser of this story of this film. So they are all of them very complex and adorable at the same time.
About that massacre on the road, takes away your peace forever.
Arthur, yes.
And I thought it probably never ends. You know, the importance of showing stuff like that to lucky people like us who've never been in a war.
Yeah, I think when we wanted to make a film about war, I think maybe the more direct through our real characters, to really understand what war is. When you listen to them telling these kind of stories you are talking about, more maybe than with a story we told in animation that is absolutely impressive, I think. But I think when you listen to these guys talking on these terms, I think then you are going to understand what is war.
Yeah. The two of you working together, you paired up as a very special team. So maybe you can explain to us what's your special force in teaming up like that to tell important stories like you just did.
Probably to confront ideas. That was the formula. Actually, the biggest challenge for us throughout these 9 years was, and at the same time, the most exciting part of the job, at least for me, was designing the story. And it took quite a long time, because it was a real challenge. I mean, the plan was to write the hybrid script, and it wasn't easy. So we spent, I don't know, 4 years working on that with different script writers and trying to learn each other's angle. Actually, we found out that the confrontation is good. Actually, we were all agreed. If we would always agree, we would probably achieve nothing. So, so there were times when we were super happy, like, you know, euphoric about having ideas. But there were also times where we had creative discussions and argues, but all of that proved to be a method, actually, because each time we were struggling with it and throwing away our ideas, something new was showing up, and it was always better. And also, it was not just us trusting in this method, it was also all of our co-producers. This is 5 countries involved, so nobody would let us just, you know, carrying on the discussions forever, and everybody trusted that this is the method. We are just locking ourselves in some remote locations and brainstorming, like really storming. I don't know how many times, but quite a lot. And that was a really, really nice collaboration. So we were working for this 4 or 5 years. So that the actual production of the film, the ending part was, I don't know, 3 years or something like that.
You feel like a married couple somehow.
Maybe because at the beginning we were fighting much more than now. At the beginning we had much more and tough fights.
But isn't it the other way around? In married couples.
No, I'm not married.
And now with the time you start to get the point of the other. I think the film has the best from him and best from me. I think there is like an essence that you are distillating things like a liquor, and with so much work, a lot of time, there's slow cook and with fight and whatever. But I think there is best of Damian, best of me, because maybe without those fights, now I realize the film wouldn't be the film that is now.
Yeah. So if you think of the real essence you came to, and maybe one thing the German audience should take home in their hearts tonight after they watch the movie or later on when they watch it in other cinemas, what this real essence we should get?
The point of view, which is not that common nowadays. Kapuscinski's point of view, which is what I mentioned. He was always looking at the world through the prism of people with whom he was spending time and living. This is something different than watching and judging the world from a perspective. Usually we have this, I don't know, Western perspective, for example. We look at the Ukraine from Western perspective at East. We may do the opposite. We can look at things from East to West. We can also look at refugees, for example, from north to south. Or we can go, like Kapuscinski, to the south and try to have an angle from the south to the north. But that was not the point. The point was to have perspective from. This is hard. I mean, with this avalanche of facts, just dehumanized facts. We see explosions, we see crowds, we see, I don't know, piles of life vests on beaches, but where are the people?
Yeah.
I would